welcome back to my podcast. Are you ready to get the inside scoop on Indonesia's security landscape? We're about to take a closer look at the complex world of politics, reform, and national security. Every Monday, I'm here to break down what's happening in this ever-changing landscape. But first, let's give a shout out to our Indonesian police and military. Congratulations on securing Pilkada 2024. This is exactly what we need more of: effective collaboration and professionalism. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute. I've heard story that the PDIP party wants to take police under the control of military or Ministry of Home Affairs. Well, let me tell you, I read some of news articles on website. It's a proposal that's got everyone talking, and we're here to explore why. But before we get into all that, let's ask ourselves, what does reformasi mean for our security sector? Is it about strengthening institutions or weakening them? And how do we ensure that our police and military are working together seamlessly? We'll also be discussing counter-terrorism efforts and recent military exercises, because in today's world, national security is no longer just about borders, it's about the threats we face every day. So, if you're ready to get your head around Indonesia's complex security landscape, then stick with me through this episode. It won't be easy, but trust me, it'll be worth it.
All right, let's jump right into it today. We're taking a deep dive into Indonesia's security landscape. Now, I know you're already up to speed on how intricate things are over there, but we've got some intel straight from the front lines, news articles, press releases, the whole 9 yards. And trust me, there's a good chance we've got some stuff here that might surprise you, especially on the counterterrorism front.
Yeah, the thing that's really caught my attention right off the bat is this recent arrest. Densus 88, Indonesia's elite counterterrorism unit, they've apprehended a suspected terrorist with ties to ISIS, and get this, in Bengkulu.
Bengkulu. Wow, okay, so not exactly the usual hotspot.
Right, exactly. And that's just the beginning. They nabbed this guy, a 42-year-old they're just calling A for now, in Mukumuko on November 24th. But here's the kicker. The evidence, Densus 88 got their hands on a motorbike and a mobile phone. It's got everyone buzzing, wondering if this could be a link to a much larger ISIS network.
See, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, you start digging into the details and things get really interesting.
And the police are being tight-lipped, no official confirmation yet. Makes you wonder what they've really stumbled onto, Could be huge.
Yeah, it definitely raises some eyebrows about what ISIS might be up to in Indonesia. But this arrest, I think it also tells us something else, something about how Indonesia's fighting terrorism. It's like a whole new approach.
Absolutely. It's way more proactive than what we've seen before. Densus 88, they're not just out there making arrests, they're going right into communities, especially talking to students. They want to educate them, get them thinking about the dangers of radicalization.
That's smart. Catch it before it even starts.
Yeah?
I was reading about an event they did at, hang on, let me get this right, SMA Nigerian Pagaiman. It's in Gorontalo. They actually brought in a former terrorist, Aldi Iwal, to share his story.
Oh, wow. Powerful stuff. I mean, anyone can lecture about radicalization, but when you hear it from someone who is in that world...
Exactly. It hits different.
No kidding. Aldi, he actually admitted that he used to think killing government officials was justified. That kind of honesty, it really lays bare just how powerful these ideologies can be. And it makes what Densus 88 is doing even more urgent. They want to give young people the tools to resist that kind of thinking. Prevent them from ever getting sucked into these organizations.
That's a huge step. Stopping it at the source. But, while we're talking boots on the ground, there's this whole other debate going on much higher up about the future of the Indonesian National Police, Polri.
Ah, yeah. This is a big one. The Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle, PDIP, they've put forward a proposal that's ruffling a lot of feathers. They're suggesting putting Polri under the control of either the TNI, that's the Indonesian National Armed Forces, or the Ministry of Home Affairs.
It's definitely stirring the pot. The PDIP, they're saying it's all about limiting the police's role in anything that could get political.
Yeah.
They want them focused on the nuts and bolts, traffic, community patrols, basic crime. But that's not sitting well with a lot of folks.
Rightfully so. You've got groups like NASDEM. They're straight up saying this goes against everything Indonesia's been working towards. The reforms, building a professional police force, one that can stand on its own 2 feet. They're worried this is a step backwards.
And, Jim Abudi, they're on a similar page. They're saying Polri needs to answer directly to the president, period. That's how you guarantee they're enforcing the law fairly for everyone. They see this as a threat to that impartiality.
And then you've got Components, they're chiming in with serious concerns too. They're saying putting Polri under the TNI or the Ministry of Home Affairs, that could really damage the progress Indonesia's made towards having a modern police force, one that reflects democratic values.
So like we've got this tug of war. Some are worried about political bias in the police, and others are saying, hang on, we can't risk their independence. It's a tough call. And then the question becomes, what does this all mean for counterterrorism efforts? I mean, could restructuring Polri actually make it harder to fight terrorism?
It's definitely a question worth asking, and it's not an easy one to answer. There are pros and cons to both sides. But, one thing's for sure, Indonesia is absolutely committed to combating terrorism. That's not up for debate.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just Densus 88 and their operations. We're seeing the Indonesian National Armed Forces, the TNI, taking on a bigger role in national development. But here's the thing. It's not your typical military stuff. This is different.
Oh, yeah, this is interesting. They're setting up these territorial development infantry battalions. By 2025, they're aiming for 100 of them to be operational. This is a major initiative. And Defense Minister Jafri Shamsodin, he's the driving force behind it.
What's really fascinating to me is how they're structured. It's not just your standard infantry units. They're going to have specialized units within each battalion, focusing on things like agriculture, fisheries, livestock, even healthcare.
That's a pretty big departure from the traditional view of the military, right? They're not just about fighting, they're about building.
Exactly. Each one of these battalions, they're going to be deploying to one of Indonesia's 514 districts. It's like having a mini task force dedicated to community development in every corner of the country.
It's a smart move because, let's face it, security isn't just about guns and soldiers. It's about making sure people have what they need, creating stability from the ground up.
Right. It's about opportunity and well-being. And, this aligns perfectly with President Prabowo Subianto's vision for the country. A strong Indonesia, sure, but one where everyone benefits. It's about security and development working hand in hand.
It's a long game. And then on top of all that, the TNI, they're also looking to expand their presence internationally. They've got their eyes on places like Morotai and Papua for joint military exercises with partner nations. So they're shoring up things at home and flexing their muscles on the regional stage.
It's a lot to juggle. Domestic security, community development, international partnerships, all while navigating this incredibly complex geopolitical landscape. It really makes you wonder, where is Indonesia headed in the grand scheme of things?
That's the million-dollar question. We're seeing them play on multiple fronts, and they're making some bold moves. It's definitely a time of transition. But one thing's clear, Indonesia is a force to be reckoned with, and they're just getting started. It's really fascinating to see how Indonesia is trying to balance all these different aspects of security. Each one comes with its own set of challenges. But let's go back to this debate about Polri for a second. I think this is about more than just politics. It gets to the core of what it means for Indonesia to be a democracy.
For sure. And the people pushing back against this PDIP proposal, they're not holding back. Like, Nasdem is basically saying this could lead Indonesia down a dangerous path right back towards authoritarianism.
Yeah. They're worried about what this could do to the police force's independence, and that's crucial if you want people to trust law enforcement,
Yeah.
It means making sure the police are neutral, they're not just a tool for some political agenda.
It's a valid point, especially given Indonesia's history. It wasn't that long ago that they were living under an authoritarian regime. So any hint of going back to that, yeah, it's going to set off alarm bells.
Absolutely. But I think it's important to remember that this debate isn't about saying Polri is bad or anything like that. It's about recognizing how important strong institutions are for a democracy to work. It's about making sure Polri is accountable to the people while also being free from any kind of political pressure.
It's a tough balance to strike, accountability and independence. But while this debate's going on, the threat of radicalization, it's still out there.
It's a persistent threat, and it's sneaky, It often targets people who are already struggling, maybe with poverty or inequality. These are the spaces where groups like ISIS can really gain a foothold.
It reminds us that this fight against terrorism, it's far from over. But the good news is Indonesia's not just focusing on arrests and crackdowns. They're also thinking about rehabilitation and reintegration.
Right. It's not just about locking people up and throwing away the key. Indonesia's trying to understand what causes radicalization in the first place, and then giving people a real chance to turn their lives around.
There's this program at Lapas Khusus Kilas Daya Karanganyar in Nusa Kambangan. It's a prison designed specifically for rehabilitating convicted terrorists.
That's interesting. So it's not about punishment, it's about transformation.
Exactly. They have all these programs aimed at helping these individuals reject extremist ideology. It's about helping them develop critical thinking skills and reintegrate into society.
It sounds promising. Is it actually working?
Well, I read that 8 individuals from this program recently pledged allegiance to Indonesia. They basically renounced their past and said they're committed to a peaceful future.
Wow, that's powerful. It shows that change is possible. But it also makes you realize we need to keep investing in these kinds of initiatives, right? They're an investment in a more peaceful and secure future for Indonesia.
I totally agree. It's a hopeful sign. But it also raises some questions, like how do these rehabilitation efforts fit into the bigger picture of Indonesia's counterterrorism strategy? And with the TNI taking on this bigger role in national development, how does that change the balance of power within Indonesia's security apparatus?
Those are the key questions, and they lead us into another critical aspect of Indonesia's security landscape, its evolving military strategy. We talked a bit about the TNI's expanding role, but I think it's worth digging a little deeper.
Yeah. Let's talk more about those 100 territorial development infantry battalions. That's a pretty big shift for a military that's traditionally been focused on external defense. It's like they're acknowledging that security in the 21st century goes beyond just protecting borders.
It's a more complex world now. Security's multifaceted. It's not just about traditional military threats. It's also about things like natural disasters, economic instability, even social unrest.
And by incorporating these specialized units into those battalions, focusing on things like agriculture, fisheries, livestock, and healthcare, the TNI is showing they're ready to address this wider range of challenges.
They're taking a more holistic approach to security, understanding that different sectors are all interconnected. This is definitely a different kind of military than what we're used to seeing.
Absolutely. It's more about building resilience, working with communities to create a more stable and prosperous Indonesia. But this doesn't mean they're neglecting their traditional military capabilities.
Right. They're also putting a lot of resources into modernization, particularly in the maritime domain. New warships, submarines, aircraft. They're boosting their ability to patrol their territorial waters, protect their economic interests, and respond to emerging threats.
Indonesia has always understood how important a strong navy is. I mean, look at their geography. They're an archipelago and a strategically important location. But this new focus on maritime security, I think it's about more than just defending their territory.
It's about power projection, asserting their presence in the region. And those joint military exercises they're planning with partner nations, like the ones in Morotai and Papua, those play a role too.
Those exercises are interesting because they do 2 things at once. They strengthen relationships with allies, and they send a message to anyone who might be thinking of challenging Indonesia.
Exactly. It's a show of force. So we're seeing this multi-layered strategy emerging. Counterterrorism efforts, innovative community engagement, military modernization, and a more prominent role on the international stage. It's a complex picture with a lot going on. But what does it all mean for Indonesia's role in the world?
That's the big question. Indonesia is definitely on the move, and the decisions they make are going to have a ripple effect throughout the entire region.
Okay, so we've spent this deep dive looking at Indonesia's security landscape from all angles. We've talked counterterrorism, the changing roles of Polri and the TNI, and it really seems like Indonesia's taking this comprehensive, forward-thinking approach to security in this day and age. But zoom out for me a bit. How does this all fit into the bigger picture? What's it mean for Indonesia, on the world stage?
I think we're seeing Indonesia at a really crucial point. The choices they're making right now, they're going to have a huge impact, not just on their own security, but on the whole region. It's like they're standing at a crossroads, and which path they choose, well, that's going to shape their future for years to come.
We've seen how they're dealing with those immediate threats like terrorism and radicalization, but they're also investing in solutions for the long haul. Like those community engagement programs, the rehabilitation efforts, and even just that broader approach to national development. Yeah, and that's what makes what Indonesia's doing so unique. They're not just reacting to what's happening around them. They're trying to get ahead of it. They're taking charge of their own security, forging their own path.
And the rest of the world's paying attention. More and more, people are seeing Indonesia as a real leader in the region, a force for stability in this crazy geopolitical landscape.
Absolutely. Their economy's growing, they're in a strategically vital location, and they've got a lot of diplomatic clout. Countries around the world want to work with them. They're becoming a voice that can't be ignored on issues like maritime security, climate change, you name it.
We talked earlier about the TNI's modernization efforts. especially their focus on beefing up their navy. But it's not just about showing off military might.
Right. They've got to secure their massive maritime territory, protect their economic interests, and make sure those vital shipping lanes stay safe. It's a huge responsibility.
Makes sense for a country that relies so much on trade and resources from the sea, but it also shows that they understand just how connected global security challenges really are.
Yeah.
They know that their security is tied to the security of the whole region, even the whole world.
It's all connected.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, it's pretty clear to me that Indonesia is a nation on the rise. They're tackling tough problems head-on, finding creative solutions, and making a real mark on the world stage.
They're definitely a country to keep an eye on. I think they can even be a model for other countries dealing with similar security issues. They're committed to democracy, they're focused on sustainable development, and they're taking a proactive approach to security, both regionally and globally.
Yeah.
They're a force for good, that's for sure.
It's been a fascinating journey exploring this dynamic and complex security landscape with you. And I think we'll leave our listeners with this.
Yeah.
Watch Indonesia. They're on the move, and their journey is just beginning.